7 terrifying methods of human sacrifice. Human sacrifice has been practiced throughout history and is usually part of a religious ritual, where the victim is killed using a very specific method in order to bring about good fortune, pacify a god, spirits, or even nature itself. To the modern mind, this practice seems barbaric and a waste of life, but the prevalence of human sacrifice all over the world and across recorded history shows that ancient man viewed sacrifices as vital to their survival. Here is my choice for 7 of the most grisly examples of human sacrifice. Be warned, disturbing content that may make you lose faith in the human race lies ahead. Number 7. The human pillar. Practiced in Japan, this method of sacrifice involved burying a human alive, under or near large and important buildings, such as castles or dams. It was seen as a prayer to the gods, and intended to protect the building from destruction or attack. Some structures built with human sacrifices still stand today. Maruoka Castle in Japan is said to have been built with a human pillar. According to legend, when the castle was being built, the stone wall would repeatedly collapse. A local woman was then used as a human pillar and buried alive under the central pillar of the castle keep. No more collapses occurred, and the castle still stands today. The Matsuohashi Bridge is also said to have used human sacrifice in its construction. Initial attempts to build the bridge would be washed away by the strong current of the river each night. After much effort, the bridge was finally completed. However, soon after being built, the pillars began to sink, and a flood then destroyed much of the bridge. It was then that a man was selected to be a human pillar. He was buried alive in the riverbed, below the middle pillar, where the current of the river is at its strongest. Since that moment, the bridge has stood for 300 years to this very day. Number 6. Retainer sacrifice. Retainer sacrifice would usually take place after the death of a king. He would be entombed with his servants, guards, handmaidens, musicians, and anyone else whom he desired. These poor individuals would then be expected to continue serving and entertaining him in the afterlife. It was initially presumed that these victims would have volunteered and then been poisoned before being entombed. However, skulls that were excavated and examined from a royal cemetery show that a sharp object was driven into the victim's head, making it very likely that those who would be sacrificed did not go willingly or peacefully. Number 5. Widow strangling. Being a married woman in Fiji used to be a very risky proposition. If her husband were to die, the surviving widow would be strangled to death. On the day of the husband's funeral, relatives of both the husband and the wife would gather in the deceased man's hut. The wife was then made to kneel whilst her own brother would tie his waistband around her neck. The widow would then exhale all of the air from her lungs whilst her brother strangled her with his waistband. It was believed that this practice was necessary because only married people were allowed to enter the afterlife. A spirit would greet the dead man and ask for proof of his marriage. With his freshly strangled wife at his side, the couple would be allowed to pass into the afterlife. Although conveniently for men, if the wife died first, the husband would not be killed. He would simply have his beard shaved off, so that the dead wife could present his beard to the spirits as proof of being married. In this case, the beard was considered enough evidence that the woman would be allowed into the afterlife on her own, carrying her husband's beard. Number 4. The Wicker Man. According to the Romans, when a high-ranking Celt died, his slaves and dependents would be burnt alongside him on the funeral pyre. The Wicker Man took this sacrificial method a step further. Celtic druids would construct giant effigies in the shape of a man out of sticks, then place living men inside, before setting the effigy aflame, burning the men alive to pay tribute to their gods. Ordinarily, the men sacrificed in this manner would be criminals. However, if nobody suitable could be found, innocent men with no children would often be used. Number 3. Mayan sinkholes. Sinkholes are a natural occurrence that happen when limestone bedrock collapses and exposes the groundwater underneath. For the deeply spiritual Mayans, these sinkholes were viewed as anything but natural, and were believed to be portals to the underworld. Victims would be thrown into the sinkholes as an offering to the water god. Excavations of one such sinkhole found the broken remains of 42 victims, half of whom were under 20 years old. The most well-known of these sinkholes is located on the archaeological site of Chichen Itza and was dredged in 1904, where artifacts of pottery, gold and jade were discovered alongside human remains. Number 2. Carthaginian fire pits. Excavations of ancient Carthaginian sites have uncovered evidence of child sacrifice by fire on a massive scale. At one site, the bones and ashes of infants were discovered. where up to 20,000 urns containing infant ashes are said to be located. Each urn was buried under tombstones, inscribed with messages of thanks to the gods. Such practices are even mentioned in the Bible, where it is said that Carthaginians sacrificed children to their god at an area known simply as the roasting place. It's believed that children were thrown into a fiery pit to give thanks for favours already bestowed by the gods, and not just in anticipation of future blessings. This marks the Carthaginians out from many ancient cultures, as their sacrifices would often be in payment for a past debt to the gods, and not just in the hope for future rewards or blessings. Number 1. The Aztecs. The human sacrifices practiced by the Aztecs are probably the most well-known and large-scale cases of human sacrifice the world has ever seen. The exact numbers sacrificed are unknown, however it is estimated to be in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, with up to 80,000 captives being sacrificed in just one 4-day-long ritual. The way the victims were sacrificed would depend on which god needed to be appeased, and there were many gods. The god of the sun and war demanded that his offerings be placed on a sacrificial stone before having their abdomen cut open with a flint blade. The heart would then be ripped from the victim's chest while still beating, and held towards the sky as an offering. The remains of the victim would then be burnt, or given to whichever warrior was responsible for capturing him. The warrior would either eat the body, or cut it into pieces, and send the pieces to local dignitaries as a gift. The fire god would be appeased, unsurprisingly, by having his offerings burnt alive. A huge feast would be held, after which enemy captives would be rounded up and burnt alive. At the moment before death, their hearts would be cut out. By sacrificing in this manner, the Aztecs believed that they would prevent the fire god from burning their cities to the ground. The god of night would most commonly be appeased through sacrificing victims in gladiatorial combat. Unfortunately for the victims, they never stood a chance. The captive would be tied down and given a fake, useless weapon, before being hacked to pieces by up to 4 fully armed knights and warriors. The god of rain needed offerings too, otherwise it was thought that the rains would not come and the crops would fail. The god of rain demanded the tears of children as his offering, and so Aztec priests would make children cry whilst they were taken away to be burnt alive. As terrible as these methods may seem, they were not the only rituals used by the Aztecs. Other Aztec sacrificial methods involved decapitation, starvation, flaying, being thrown from a tall building, and being bludgeoned to death.